The snow lay thick on the Bavarian mountains in late 1943. Most of the world was focused on the front lines, soldiers storming beaches, tanks rolling across the countryside, cities burning under relentless bombardment. But hidden in the shadows of a remote valley was a facility the Allies, and even most of the German High Command, did not know existed. It had no name on any map, no coordinates in any official dossier. Even whispers about it were considered treasonous. Inside, a handful of men were building something the world would never see. Something so dangerous, so revolutionary, that even after the war, it would remain classified for 70 years. Dr. Friedrich Albrecht was not a soldier. He was not a politician. He was an engineer, a man whose genius bordered on obsession. Albrecht had been recruited by the Reich early in the war for his work on experimental energy systems. Unlike other engineers, he did not crave fame or medals. He craved discovery, and he craved secrecy. In the main chamber of the facility, he paced before a steel platform. On it rested the device. It was small, no bigger than a motorcar engine, but deceptively intricate. Tubes, wires, and magnetic coils twisted in impossible formations. A core chamber, lined in copper and reinforced with exotic alloys, seemed almost alive. Albrecht's assistants hovered nearby, eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. None of them fully understood the calculations that had created it. "Gentlemen," Albrecht said, voice low and urgent, "we are on the edge of something that will rewrite what humanity believes is possible. But it must remain hidden. Absolute secrecy." One of the younger engineers, barely 20, swallowed hard. "You mean the Allies cannot know?" Albrecht's eyes were cold. "They must never know. If anyone outside this room sees it, the war ends not in years but in months, perhaps weeks, perhaps sooner, but only if it is controlled. If it falls into the wrong hands, it will destroy everything." The device had no official name. It was referred to simply as Projekt Schatten, Project Shadow. Its purpose was classified in the highest echelons of the Reich. Even Hitler had only received partial briefings. The technology was unlike anything ever attempted. It could manipulate energy flows with unprecedented efficiency. IT could create a localized force field, amplify mechanical power beyond known limits. IT could theoretically make weapons, vehicles, or engines operate at previously impossible levels. The math behind it was revolutionary. The metal alloys used in its construction had never been publicly documented. The energy source, compact, stable, and potent, remained a secret known only to Albrecht. It was the kind of machine that could turn the tide of war, not by brute force, but by sheer technological superiority. And for the men in the facility, the stakes were clear. Failure meant execution. The first tests of Projekt Schatten were clandestine and terrifying. Albrecht gathered his team in the main chamber. Only a small group of soldiers and engineers were present, enough to observe but not enough to question. The device emitted a faint hum, almost imperceptible at first. Then, slowly, the hum intensified, vibrating through the steel floor and into the bones of those present. The engineers watched as metallic objects floated above the platform, suspended by an invisible force. Wires sparked, lights flickered, and instruments registered energy fluctuations beyond the chart's limits. "Faster, more stable," Albrecht muttered, adjusting dials and rotating copper rings. Suddenly, a shockwave radiated through the chamber. Paper, small tools, and even some instruments were lifted into the air. One of the assistants stumbled backward. "Dr. Albrecht, it's too strong." Albrecht's eyes burned with excitement. "No, it is exactly as predicted. The device is exceeding its design parameters. This is not instability, this is potential." The soldiers exchanged nervous glances. Some whispered prayers. Others considered fleeing. But the doors were locked. There was no escape. As weeks passed, the test grew more ambitious and more dangerous. Albrecht documented every reaction, every fluctuation. He calculated with feverish precision how to control the device, how to harness its power safely. But the machine had a mind of its own. It did not respond to human intention. It responded to physics itself, bending energy, creating resonance patterns and producing forces that seemed almost sentient. Rumors began circulating among the engineers. Some claimed to see shadows move independently of the light. Others felt a presence in the room, as if the device were aware of them. Albrecht dismissed these stories. Logic, math, and controlled experimentation were the only truths. Emotion was irrelevant. But deep inside, even he could not deny it, the device was alive in some sense, a creation that could not be fully controlled, only guided. By 1944, the Reich's military brass became aware of Projekt Schatten. High-ranking officers demanded results. The pressure intensified. Security around the facility increased. Guards patrolled the halls with rifles, ensuring no one left with secrets. Albrecht's team worked in silence, knowing that a single misstep could be fatal. Soldiers who questioned the project disappeared mysteriously. Some claimed the Gestapo had removed them. Others said the machine itself punished those who disobeyed. But the test continued, and the device responded. It amplified engines, powered experimental vehicles, and even lifted heavy artillery with minimal energy. The results were undeniable. This was not a conventional invention. Albrecht knew, however, that if word of the device reached the Allies, it would trigger a global arms race, one humanity was not ready for. And so the project was classified, hidden, buried under layers of secrecy that would endure for 7 decades. As the war ended, the facility was abandoned. Albrecht dismantled parts of the device, hid the blueprints, and destroyed evidence. Only he and a handful of trusted engineers knew the full scope of Projekt Schatten. The Allies would never discover the device during the occupation. The machine's power remained a secret. For 70 years, the world would remain unaware that a small facility in Bavaria had created a device capable of reshaping warfare, that a handful of men had touched the edge of scientific impossibility, that human ambition had been held in check, not by morality, but by the sheer danger of what they had created. And when the classified files were finally declassified, the story shocked historians. Projekt Schatten was not just a machine. It was a glimpse of a world that could have been, a device that could have ended wars, or destroyed nations. The facility had been silent for hours. Only the faint hum of Projekt Schatten filled the air, vibrating through the reinforced steel walls. It was a sound that seemed alive, almost sentient, as if the machine were aware of the world beyond the lab. Dr. Friedrich Albrecht stood in the observation room, staring at the chamber below. Engineers and soldiers moved like ghosts in the shadows, carefully monitoring dials and instruments that charted energies beyond comprehension. Albrecht's hand hovered over a lever, controlling the energy output. He knew the risks. He knew what could happen if the machine exceeded its limits. And yet, he was compelled forward. The device was no longer theoretical. It was real. It was powerful. It was dangerous. By mid-1944, the Reich demanded proof. The generals in high command wanted results, weaponized results. They didn't care about safety or theory. They wanted a machine that could give them an unstoppable advantage. Albrecht had a plan. He had spent months testing the device at small scales, gradually increasing its energy output. The results were promising, but each test left him more aware of the dangers: energy spikes, distortions in the air, and equipment behaving unpredictably. Now, they demanded a full-scale demonstration. He summoned the team to the main chamber. Soldiers lined the walls, rifles ready. Engineers took positions at control panels. Only Albrecht and a handful of trusted assistants understood the device fully. The machine sat at the center of the chamber, silent, dormant, but alive in its potential. Copper coils glinted under the dim lights. Exotic alloys hummed with latent energy. The core chamber glowed faintly, a blue shimmer, barely noticeable, but enough to signal to contain power within. Albrecht's assistant, a young engineer named Heinrich, swallowed hard. "Dr. Albrecht, what if it fails?" Albrecht's eyes were cold. Failure is not an option. But yes, if it fails, it will be catastrophic. The words hung in the air, heavy as the metal beams above them. Albrecht activated the primary sequence. Lights flickered. Instruments jumped. The hum intensified, vibrating the floor beneath their feet. Objects in the chamber began to levitate. Small tools, scraps of metal, even a few unsecured instruments. The air shimmered, bending light slightly, giving the impression that the room itself was warping. "Observe!" Albrecht whispered. The machine was alive, not in the biological sense, but in its reaction to energy, matter, and space. Every pulse, every fluctuation seemed intentional, as if the device were testing its human operators. A sudden spike jolted the readings. Sparks flew. A metallic clang echoed through the chamber as a monitor lifted into the air. Heinrich stumbled backward, eyes wide with fear. Dr. Albrecht, "Shut it down," he shouted. Albrecht ignored him. He adjusted the frequency, carefully synchronizing the resonance fields. The hum deepened. Light in the chamber bent around the core, creating the illusion of a small storm contained in steel and glass. As the energy built, Albrecht noticed something remarkable. The machine wasn't just amplifying energy. It was bending space within the chamber. Not violently, not catastrophically, but subtly. Measurements indicated a distortion that should have been impossible. Objects shifted fractionally. Time readings fluctuated slightly, and even light itself seemed to curve around the device. This isn't just amplification, Albrecht muttered to himself. It's a fundamental alteration of the environment. The laws of physics are different inside the field. Heinrich leaned closer, voice trembling. "Dr. Albrecht, are you saying it's breaking physics?" Albrecht nodded slowly. "Not breaking, rewriting. We are witnessing something humanity has never seen before. And we must be careful. One wrong calculation, one misstep. The young engineer didn't need him to finish." They both knew if the machine were misused, the results could be catastrophic, not just for the facility, but for the surrounding region. The demonstration did not go unnoticed. Word of the machine reached the upper echelons of the Reich's military command. Within days, security was tightened, and generals arrived in person. Albrecht welcomed them with caution. These men were not here to understand the science. They were here to control it, to weaponize it. General Karl Richter, a tall man with cold, calculating eyes, stepped forward. "Dr. Albrecht, we've heard your machine is extraordinary, but can it be used on the battlefield? Can it give the Reich an advantage so decisive that the Allies will be crushed?" Albrecht swallowed. He had anticipated this question. "Theoretically, yes, but the risks are extreme. The device is unstable at full power. Misuse could destroy the chamber, kill everyone present, or worse, cause effects beyond containment." Richter's expression hardened. "The risk is irrelevant. If it works, we win the war. If it fails, it is your responsibility. Ensure it succeeds." And with that, the generals left, leaving Albrecht with a decision he had hoped never to make. The next test was forced by circumstance. Supplies for other weapons were failing. Hitler's obsession with superweapons drove the decision. Projekt Schatten had to be weaponized immediately. Albrecht reluctantly prepared the device. He calibrated, adjusted, and double-checked every parameter. The assistant, aware of the stakes, worked in tense silence. The machine activated. The hum became a roar. Sparks flew. Instruments lifted from tables. The room seemed to breathe with the machine's power. And then it reacted unpredictably. The core pulse amplified too quickly. Metal twisted. Wires snapped. Energy arcs jumped dangerously across the chamber. A small shockwave knocked several soldiers to ground. Albrecht shouted, "Emergency shutdown!" But the mechanism failed. The machine had exceeded all previous tests. The energy field stretched across the chamber, bending reality subtly but unmistakably. The engineers realized they were not in control. The machine had a power of its own. Albrecht's hands trembled. He calculated, recalculated, and improvised a containment sequence, narrowly preventing a catastrophic failure. When the chamber finally stabilized, smoke and sparks littered the floor. Instruments were destroyed. The device hummed quietly, deceptively dormant. Everyone present understood the truth. This machine could have ended the war in weeks, but it was too dangerous to be used. Albrecht faced a choice. The Reich wanted results. The military demanded weaponization. And yet, the machine's instability, its power, and its unpredictable effects could not be contained. He made the decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Projekt Schatten would be classified. All records, blueprints, and calculations would be hidden. Only a few trusted individuals, himself included, would know the truth. Even if the war ended, the secret must survive. The device, capable of bending energy, manipulating matter, and defying physics, would vanish from history. Its existence would be denied, its potential erased. For 70 years, the world would remain ignorant, but the memory, the understanding of what could have been would never leave him. The days after the failed full-scale tests were silent, almost eerily so. The facility seemed heavier, as if the walls themselves were aware of the power they contained. Engineers moved cautiously, whispers of fear and awe passing between them like currents. Even the guards kept their distance from the main chamber, wary of the residual energy that still hummed faintly. Dr. Friedrich Albrecht knew the machine had potential far beyond what anyone had imagined. Not just a weapon, a force that could alter reality itself. He also knew that the world outside the facility had no idea how close humanity had come to stepping into an entirely new realm of power. Albrecht returned to his private lab, a small room stacked with notes, calculations, and early prototypes. He spread the diagrams of Projekt Schatten across the table. Each line, each curve, each coil represented decades of thought, experimentation, and danger. If applied on a battlefield, the device could amplify energy to levels that would make conventional weapons obsolete. Tanks could move faster, planes could fly longer, artillery could fire with unimaginable force. The very laws of physics, warped within the device's field, offered an advantage that could end conflicts in weeks rather than years. And yet, Albrecht understood the consequence. One miscalculation, one field misalignment, and the device could tear apart not just a facility, but a region. Energy would ripple uncontrollably. Matter could destabilize. Even a small error might trigger a chain reaction of destruction. He ran simulations on paper, imagining how the device would interact with different terrains, weather conditions, and military vehicles. Each scenario revealed horrifying possibilities. The more powerful the device, the less predictable its effects. And that was exactly why it had to remain hidden. By early 1945, rumors of Projekt Schatten had reached higher-ranking officials in Berlin. The military demanded answers. Reports of strange energy experiments, unusual test results, and unexplained phenomena in Bavaria reached Hitler's inner circle. General Karl Richter arrived at the facility again, flanked by officers and soldiers. His eyes burned with a hunger for victory. "Dr. Albrecht," he said, voice sharp, "we've heard whispers. Tell us the truth. Can this device end the war?" Albrecht hesitated. The answer was yes, but not without catastrophic risk. "Sir," he said carefully, "the device works, but it is unstable at full power. The consequences of misuse are unpredictable." Richter's lips curled into a cold smile. "Unpredictable? That is war. Victory requires risk. Make it operational. Now!" Albrecht clenched his fists. He had no illusions. If the military controlled the device, thousands, perhaps millions, would die. Yet refusing could mean his own execution. Albrecht and his team prepared the device for another test. They worked quietly, knowing that the slightest mistake could be fatal. When activated, the machine pulsed, energy radiating outward in faint waves. Instruments quivered. Sparks danced along the metallic framework. A blue shimmer appeared at the core, a swirling, almost sentient glow that made even hardened soldiers uneasy. Albrecht watched carefully. The machine's energy began to warp the room slightly, bending light, distorting air, making shadows stretch unnaturally. He realized with chilling clarity the device was learning, not in a human sense, but in a fundamental physical sense. It responded to energy input, to magnetic fields, to environmental variables, adapting, improving, growing. The engineers exchanged nervous glances. None had seen anything like it. "This isn't just a machine," whispered Heinrich, the young engineer. "It's evolving." Albrecht didn't answer. He knew the truth. If the machine continued on this trajectory, it could surpass human understanding entirely. During one test, The device reacted violently. Energy spikes shot out unpredictably. Instruments shattered. Sparks flew dangerously close to flammable materials. A small shockwave knocked several soldiers off their feet. Albrecht shouted, "Emergency shutdown!" The machine, however, resisted. The field did not collapse immediately. Objects floated, twisted, and fell, ricocheting across the room. Energy arcs shot across the chamber walls. One engineer was caught under a falling metal beam. Albrecht dove, pulling him to safety. When the field finally collapsed, the chamber was littered with debris. Dust hung in the air, and a faint blue glow lingered in the core chamber, as if the device itself was breathing. No one spoke. The reality of what they had witnessed sank in. They had created something far beyond conventional technology, something too powerful for the human mind or the human military to control. Albrecht faced an impossible choice. The Reich wanted a weapon capable of ending the war, but the consequences were too great. He realized the machine could have destroyed entire cities in hours. It could have rewritten the rules of energy, altering the physical world in ways humanity could not comprehend. And yet, if hidden and preserved, it could also offer humanity untold knowledge, but only if the world were ready, and only if it were safe. The moral weight was unbearable. Could he destroy it? Hide it? Preserve it? The war outside was collapsing. Allied forces advanced from the west, Soviet troops from the east. Every day brought new pressure, new urgency. Albrecht knew the decision could not wait. After consulting with his closest assistants, Albrecht made a plan. The device would be dismantled. Critical components would be hidden in separate locations. Blueprints and calculations would be burned or encrypted. Only a handful of trusted engineers would retain knowledge of the full system. It was painstaking work. Every wire, coil, and energy module had to be carefully deactivated, transported, or destroyed. When the final shutdown occurred, the core chamber fell silent. The blue shimmer disappeared. The hum was gone. The room was still. Albrecht exhaled deeply. He knew that history would never remember the device. The war would end without it. Yet the secret of what had been achieved would live on, hidden in the shadows. The world outside the mountains would remain unaware. No one would know that a machine capable of rewriting energy, bending matter, and changing the course of wars had existed. Albrecht and his team dispersed, taking fragments of knowledge with them. Some were executed for leaving the facility. Some vanished mysteriously. The device, the most classified invention of the war, was lost to history for decades. And yet, for those who had witnessed its power, the memory remained. A machine that defied physics, energy bending in ways previously impossible. A glimpse of what humanity could achieve, and what it should never touch. For 70 years, the secret would remain buried. But the whispers, the documents, the faint blueprints hidden in private archives, they would one day resurface. Humanity would finally discover the truth. That machine, unimaginable in its potential, had existed, and it had been classified, hidden, and erased from history for a reason. Spring of 1945. The war raged toward its inevitable conclusion. Berlin smoldered under relentless bombardment, Hitler's empire crumbling from both fronts. The Reich's leaders scrambled, desperate to salvage power, secrets, and prestige. Yet in Bavarian mountains, the facility housing Projekt Schatten remained untouched, an island of silence amid chaos. Dr. Friedrich Albrecht walked through the empty corridors, inspecting the main chamber one last time. Dust hung in the air, lit by shafts of sunlight piercing small observation windows. The machine, the device that had defied physics itself, was disassembled and hidden in crates, components scattered and encrypted in ways only he and a handful of engineers could reconstruct. It was over, at least for now. The generals were gone. Soldiers deserted or fled. The Allies were closing in, and rumors of the Reich's miracle weapon spread, but no one suspected the truth. Albrecht convened his team for one final meeting. The mood was tense. Some engineers had grown weary of secrecy. Some feared the consequences of keeping knowledge alive. "We have done what is necessary," Albrecht said, voice steady but heavy. "The world must never know. Not now. Not ever. Our creation is too dangerous." He handed encrypted notes and diagrams to trusted assistants, instructing them to scatter the components. Each piece of the machine was hidden in separate locations: forests, abandoned bunkers, private estates. Every detail that could lead to reconstruction was buried. One young engineer, Heinrich, looked doubtful. "Dr. Albrecht, won't someone eventually find it? What if they try to rebuild it?" Albrecht's eyes hardened. "And if they do, it will not be the same. Only those who understand its principles can reconstruct it safely. Few will survive the attempt. That is the price of knowledge." The decision weighed heavily on them all. They were scientists, engineers, dreamers, but they had touched a power too great for humanity. The weight of secrecy pressed down on their shoulders like the steel beams of the facility itself. In theory, Projekt Schatten could have altered the entire course of the war. Tanks could have moved faster than any conventional vehicle. Artillery could fire farther and with unmatched precision. Aircraft could reach impossible speeds, powered by the energy amplifications the device generated. Entire cities could have been subdued or obliterated in weeks rather than years. The machine's potential was staggering and terrifying. Albrecht understood this better than anyone. It was why he had made the decision to dismantle it, to hide it, to classify it in the shadows. Some of his colleagues questioned the morality of the act. They wanted recognition, fame, and proof of their genius. But Albrecht reminded them, knowledge without restraint is more dangerous than ignorance. The world had been spared by secrecy, by caution, by the conscience of a few men who understood that humanity was not ready. Even as Albrecht and his team executed the final steps of hiding the device, Allied forces approached. Intelligence reports had hinted at experimental research sites, but nothing had identified the full scope of Projekt Schatten. One morning, Allied soldiers arrived at the facility. They were cautious, wary of traps, mines, or hidden weaponry. Albrecht met them calmly, presenting the facility as abandoned research labs with minor technological experiments. Nothing groundbreaking. The Allies accepted his explanation at face value. As they left, Albrecht allowed himself a private moment of relief. They had passed inspection. The secret had survived another day. The war officially ended in Europe in May 1945. Albrecht's facility was abandoned, left to decay in the remote mountains. The machine itself, Projekt Schatten, was hidden, scattered, and encrypted, waiting for a world ready or foolish enough to attempt reconstruction. Albrecht and his team dispersed across Europe. Some emigrated quietly. Others returned to academia, taking the knowledge of the machine with them. The world would celebrate its victory, study its failures, and mourn its losses, but no history book would ever mention Projekt Schatten. It was erased from records, omitted from reports, and denied in countless official documents. And yet, for those who had been present, the memory lingered. The hum of the machine, the shimmer of its energy, the sensation that they had witnessed something beyond human comprehension. It haunted them. Albrecht often reflected on the weight of secrecy. They had touched a power that could have reshaped nations, rewritten physics, and ended wars in weeks. Yet they had chosen restraint. The moral burden was immense. He carried it daily, a constant reminder that knowledge without responsibility is a weapon in itself. Even decades later, he would dream of the device, the pulse of energy in the chamber, objects suspended and twisting midair, the subtle bending of reality around it. He understood that humanity was not yet ready. Perhaps it never would be. In the years following the war, the intelligence community cataloged and classified thousands of documents. Many experimental projects were documented, but Projekt Schatten was conspicuously absent. Only fragments remained in encrypted archives, hidden from public scrutiny. Over the decades, conspiracy theories and rumors circulated. Secret Nazi weapons, experimental energy devices, and impossible machines. Few could separate fact from fiction. Albrecht's work was buried under layers of bureaucracy, secrecy, and redaction. The knowledge that survived was partial, fragmented, and almost impossible to reconstruct without first-hand experience. The world believed the technology had been lost. And in many ways, it had been. Even as the facility crumbled under the weight of time, and the mountains reclaimed their territory, the machine's legacy endured in whispers. Occasionally, engineers and physicists would encounter unusual energy phenomena, obscure documents, or forgotten notes in European archives hinting at possibilities far beyond conventional physics. Some believed these were coincidences, minor anomalies, or exaggerations. Others, rare and daring, suspected the truth, that a machine capable of defying physics had existed. Albrecht knew the truth, and for 70 years he guarded it silently, a sentinel over knowledge humanity could not yet wield. The war had ended. Europe lay in ruins, and yet the secret of Projekt Schatten endured. Hidden in crates, buried in bunkers, encrypted in private notes, the machine that defied physics had vanished from the public eye, but not from memory. Dr. Friedrich Albrecht lived quietly in the aftermath, moving between towns, taking odd jobs, teaching a few select students, and maintaining a life of invisibility. The weight of his knowledge was constant. Each passing day reminded him that the world had been spared, not by victory, but by secrecy. For decades, whispers of unusual technology circulated among engineers, physicists, and intelligence agencies. Few dared speak aloud. Even those who stumbled upon fragments of the machine's design understood the danger. In private archives across Europe, pieces of the device in Albrecht's research survived, though heavily obscured. Some blueprints were buried beneath layers of falsified documentation. Some prototype components were hidden in disused bunkers, rusting yet intact. Personal notes, coded and encrypted, were scattered among trusted engineers who had survived the war. Occasionally, an engineer would die, and rumors of their involvement would surface. Some whispered that they had taken their secrets to the grave, unwilling to share the knowledge of a machine too dangerous for humanity. Albrecht continued to monitor these fragments quietly. He knew that one day the world might uncover them, but he also knew that understanding the machine fully would be as dangerous as using it. By the 1960s, some of the machine's principles began appearing in scientific journals: energy amplification techniques, experimental resonance fields, and theories of localized force manipulation. No one connected these dots to Projekt Schatten. The work was too scattered, too encoded. Yet Albrecht watched from the shadows. He realized that humanity was inching closer to rediscovering his creation. He wrestled with a moral dilemma. Should he intervene, warning scientists of the dangers? Or should he allow curiosity to lead discovery, knowing the risks could be catastrophic? The answer was always the same: silence. The world was not yet ready. Even hidden, the machine left a subtle legacy. Some experimental engines in the 1950s and 60s achieved higher efficiency than expected. Engineers puzzled over the results, unaware they were seeing shadows of Albrecht's work. A few classified projects in Europe hinted at energy manipulation techniques that mirrored aspects of Projekt Schatten. Whispers in intelligence communities spoke of Nazi superweapons that had never been used. Few took these stories seriously, dismissing them as myths. But for Albrecht, the evidence was clear. The machine's influence persisted quietly, shaping technology in unseen ways, a ghost of what had once existed. Albrecht grew older, burdened not just by the secrets themselves, but by the knowledge of how close humanity had come to wielding uncontrollable power. He knew any reconstruction of Projekt Schatten without full understanding could trigger catastrophic events. Energy amplifications at that scale were unpredictable, and even minor miscalculations could result in destruction of buildings, towns, or even regions. Curiosity alone was a dangerous force. He carried this knowledge in solitude. Family and friends noticed his obsession with secrecy, his avoidance of fame, his quiet, intense demeanor, but none knew the true reason. He often walked alone through forests, imagining what could have happened if the machine had fallen into reckless hands. Entire cities could have been obliterated. Millions of lives might have been lost. And yet, the machine's dormant power lingered somewhere in Europe, waiting for discovery. By the 1980s and 90s, conspiracy theories about lost Nazi technology had gained traction. Books and documentaries speculated on impossible weapons, secret experiments, and machines that defied physics. Few dared suggest that these theories might contain truth. Even fewer considered that a small Bavarian facility had created a device capable of altering reality itself. Albrecht watched from a distance as curiosity grew. He knew the fascination was inevitable. Humanity has always been drawn to forbidden knowledge. And yet he also knew the stakes. Any attempt to reconstruct the device without the full understanding he and his assistants possessed would be disastrous. The secret had survived for decades, not because it was forgotten, but because it had been carefully hidden by those who understood its danger. Albrecht's later years were marked by quiet vigilance. He ensured the components remained hidden, coded, and encrypted. He visited old bunkers, inspected forgotten crates, and occasionally adjusted encryption to prevent accidental discovery. Time was his ally, but also his enemy. With every passing year, the likelihood of discovery grew. He feared that one day, curiosity, ambition, or desperation would lead someone to attempt to rebuild Projekt Schatten. And if they did, the consequences could be unimaginable. Even in his twilight years, the hum of the device haunted his dreams. He remembered the blue glow, the object suspended in midair, the subtle bending of reality itself. The knowledge of what had existed, a machine classified for 70 years, was both a curse and a burden. The world celebrated the end of World War II and moved forward, unaware of the true secrets that lay hidden in mountains, bunkers, and private archives. Projekt Schatten, the device that defied physics, remained a ghost in history, a machine that could have ended wars in weeks, a technology so advanced it surpassed contemporary physics. A power hidden by conscience, secrecy, and moral restraint. Albrecht and his few surviving assistants knew the truth. They carried it quietly, silently, and at great personal cost. The device's legacy was subtle, almost invisible, yet undeniable. Inventions inspired by its principles surfaced quietly, but humanity remained ignorant of the full potential of what had been created. And for 70 years, the world continued unaware that a machine had existed that could have changed history, and that it had been hidden for its own safety. By the early 2000s, the world had changed dramatically. Wars had been fought and lost. Technology had advanced in ways that would have astonished Dr. Friedrich Albrecht, and yet the secret of Projekt Schatten remained buried. Albrecht was long gone, passing away quietly, leaving behind only scattered notes and encrypted files. His surviving assistants had similarly vanished into obscurity or death. But the machine, the device that defied physics itself, had not been completely lost. It waited. 70 years after its creation, the world would finally glimpse the truth. Government archives in Europe and the United States began slowly declassifying certain World War II-era projects. Among thousands of mundane military documents, a few obscure files referenced experimental energy devices in Bavaria. The references were brief, technical, and cryptic, but enough to attract attention. Historians, physicists, and conspiracy researchers began piecing together a story. A machine capable of bending energy and matter. Experiments that defied known laws of physics. A project so secret that its details were scrubbed from records, hidden in bunkers, and encrypted in private notes. The world began to understand, for the first time, the true scope of what had been built and hidden. As declassified files emerged, some physical fragments of the machine were rediscovered. Copper coils, partially corroded, were found in abandoned bunkers. Alloy components, previously thought destroyed, surfaced in private estates. Encrypted notes, painstakingly written in codes only understood by Albrecht and his closest assistants, were recovered from archives. Scientists cautiously examined these remnants. Many were astounded by the sophistication of the design, the understanding of energy manipulation, and the ingenuity of the engineers who had built it under wartime constraints. One researcher remarked, "It's unlike anything else from that era. It's not just advanced, it's revolutionary." They were centuries ahead. The rediscovery of Projekt Schatten reopened a debate that had haunted Albrecht and his assistants for decades. Should such knowledge be shared? Could humanity wield it safely, or would exposure lead to catastrophe? Some argued that modern technology, simulations, and safety measures could allow reconstruction without danger. Others warned that curiosity and ambition could repeat history, potentially creating energy surges, destructive failures, or unpredictable physical distortions. The same moral dilemma that Albrecht had faced persisted. Knowledge without responsibility could be lethal. Projekt Schatten left an indelible mark on history, even while hidden. It influenced covert research programs and inspired theoretical advances in energy manipulation. Ideas derived from its blueprints surfaced in civilian and military technologies, albeit without the original device's raw power. It demonstrated the extremes of human ingenuity and human restraint. Historians noted that the device, classified for 70 years, had not been forgotten entirely. Its shadow lingered in engineering textbooks, obscure journals, and the memories of those who had witnessed it firsthand. For some, it became a cautionary tale, a reminder that progress unchecked by ethics could be catastrophic. Despite fragments being rediscovered, the complete device was never rebuilt. The blueprints were incomplete. The critical energy core was missing, hidden, or destroyed. Reconstruction attempts would have been perilous without Albrecht's guidance. The machine remained a ghost of history, a proof of what had been achieved, but also a warning of what could happen if such knowledge were mishandled. Even in the 21st century, researchers studying the remnants understood that this was not just a historical curiosity. It was a technological leap humanity had narrowly avoided misusing. The secrecy surrounding Projekt Schatten added to its allure. Conspiracy theorists speculated endlessly. Documentaries and books hinted at impossible Nazi inventions. The myth of a machine that defied physics captured imaginations worldwide. And yet, for those who had been there, for those who had built and tested it, the allure was tempered by fear and respect. Albrecht's choice to hide the device was vindicated. Humanity had survived, unaware of how close it had come to wielding power beyond comprehension. Projekt Schatten left lessons beyond physics and engineering. 1. Human ingenuity is limitless, but so too is human folly. 2. Secrecy can be a safeguard when knowledge is too dangerous to wield recklessly. 3. Moral responsibility must guide the use of power. Brilliance without ethics can be deadly. 4. History may not remember all achievements, but some secrets endure for survival. The device became a symbol of restraint as much as a symbol of genius. When files and fragments were finally made public, the world learned the truth. A device had existed, capable of bending physics itself. It had been built under most extreme secrecy, tested under dangerous conditions. Its potential to end wars or destroy regions had been real. It had been classified for 70 years, hidden not out of pride, but out of necessity. The story fascinated the world, scientists, historians, and the public alike. The legacy of Projekt Schatten was no longer hidden, but its lessons remained clear. Knowledge without ethics is a weapon. Genius unchecked can destroy. And sometimes, the greatest inventions are those humanity never uses. Today, Projekt Schatten exists in fragments, archives, and the imaginations of those who know its story. Dr. Friedrich Albrecht and his team had survived the war, safeguarded the machine, and ensured its potential danger never manifested. 70 years later, humanity finally glimpsed a machine that defied physics, understood the choices made to protect the world, and marveled at the ingenuity, restraint, and courage of those who created and concealed it. Projekt Schatten remained a testament. The most powerful inventions are not always meant to be wielded, and some secrets are preserved not for power, but for survival itself.